This is Story Talk, a series of online conversations featuring storytellers and artists from around the world, especially curated for the 5th anniversary of StoryFest Singapore. Today, I'm going to be talking with Deric Ee, a writer and arts manager based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And we are going to be talking about adapting text for storytelling performance. Hi, Deric. Nice to have you on Story Talk.
Hi, Kamini. Thank you so much for having me here.
So we've been collaborating cross-border during the pandemic, and we've been working together on a project called KL Noir Magic Storytelling Series. And you're the producer on the other end of the causeway, for StoryFest's very special commission to, think about cross-border ties and to make sure we still have that international artist element and participation. Can you tell us a little bit more about this project?
First of all, I'd like to thank you at StoryFest for giving us this opportunity to work with KL Noir. Part of the reason we thought like this would be a great idea was because we wanted to promote the book. We have this book, this anthology of short stories out now on Fixi. And for this set of short stories, I got to work with one of my heroes in the local art scene, who's Ame Muhammad. So Ame owns Fixi, and as well as Kuman Pictures, which does amazing horror films. So when we got the opportunity to create adaptations of video adaptations of stories from KL Noir, we jumped at the chance because this would be the best way to get the stories out to the public.
So, when we started talking about this project, right, it was stories that were written by authors, and these are short stories, and these are all writers who are writing for print, for someone to read their stories. I don't think they ever imagined that their stories would be adapted by spoken word artists and storytellers and performers, and then presented as a video product. What was that process like navigating, right, for permission and speaking to the authors and speaking to Amir as publisher as well?
So as this was like a first-time project, we've never done anything of this sort for any of the previous Fixi anthologies. All of the writers were really supportive of the bat. They were just really thrilled to have this opportunity to have their stories turned into video. Because of that, we know that reading in Malaysia is not like the number one pastime. So this helps get the stories out and encourage people to check out the source material.
So the writers were open for the spoken word artists and storytellers to adapt their work, because remember, the writing duration is very different. The length of the stories are different, but for the videos, we needed to keep it within that 5-minute time frame. Were the writers open to that level of adaptation?
Yes, from what I know, right off the bat, they said yes. They said yes to the project. They knew that their stories would be cut down to 5 to 7 minutes, but they have not seen the final product or heard the final stories yet. But they do know there will be a lot of major changes for some of the stories.
So I think, personally, as someone who's also worked with writers and publishers adapting contemporary text into spoken word or stories, there needs to be this level of trust, right, between the storyteller or the person who's going to present your work in how you adapt somebody else's text. And I think the writer and publisher have to honestly let go and trust the artist or the performer in reshaping and representing their stories. What has this process been like for you as the person in the middle, right? So you're the mediator between the spoken word performers and storytellers who are presenting the work, and also the writers who are the ones who own the text.
So for me, it's a bit interesting because I'm not only the editor of the book, but I'm also the producer of the video series, and I'm also one of the talents that will be presenting the text. The liaising part with the authors were no issue. They were all very supportive. I think perhaps the toughest part about adapting the text comes from working with the performers. The performers were very concerned about adapting someone else's work. They wanted to know, is it a matter of creating an abridged version or interpreting it into something else? Is it a matter of changing the language so they can retell it in front of the camera? So the authors were no issue, to be honest, and Ame, the publisher, was perhaps the most supportive. He had no further questions.
And something else that I think our viewers and listeners would love to know is that you were doing all of this under very strict movement restriction conditions, right? So I'm glad that we started this conversation very early last year so that a lot of the initial work, the groundwork, could be done. what was that like, producing a series of 7 short story adaptations into videos with the restrictions and, the whole problem of working within a pandemic? What's that been like for you as a producer?
I'm not going to lie, it was not easy, Kamini. Even from the start, we had a lot of issues with talents wanting to know what is our protocol like for filming. Um, some of the early actors we approached were not confident because the entire scene was shaken up by the pandemic. People were still navigating how do we create productions, how do we get our content out there without risking anyone's lives. So for our project, we had to go through a lot of scheduling, a lot of rescheduling. We were expecting them to announce a lockdown over and over again. It never happened until like last week, thankfully. We still got everything done. We did it with masks on behind the set. We had our talents coming early just to prepare, get everything done on the spot. It was hard, but I'm glad we got it done. I've never done anything of this sort during the pandemic. So a lot of us have been working from home, right? We do everything on the computer. To have a video shoot, you can't really do a video shoot remotely. I mean, you can rehearse remotely, but shooting on the actual day itself was tough.
So you work very closely with the 7 storytellers and the performers. What were some of the difficulties or challenges that they faced in trying to think about the author's text and how to present this text now as a storytelling performance? I mean, you were also privy to that process as someone who was not just the editor of the short stories, and you know the manuscripts really well, but now you're also the producer and the coordinator of this live presentation project.
So one of the biggest challenges I've noticed was everyone was very hesitant to change the source material. I came up across this line recently from an article I was reading, like treat the source as a story, not as a text. And I think a lot of the hesitance comes from people basically being afraid to muddle up someone else's work. So by the time that I came in as a performer, this happened at the last minute as we had some unusual circumstances. So when I came in as a performer, I thought like, okay, I've seen how everyone has been adapting their works, and a lot of them have chosen to retain much of the text and the signature writing styles. So I thought I could go crazy, and with my adaptation, I think I went up the furthest. I wrote songs for it. I just cut the dialogues. I changed a lot of it. There's another thing I read recently that said you have to approach a text with fascination as well as skepticism, because you can't treat the author as like a god figure, They're not perfect. Their story would have something that may not be relevant or resonant to you as the storyteller. And that relevance is the most important thing when you're retelling a story.
Yes, so you spoke about how you included song in your version of that story, right? And I've watched the video and I found that amazing. That really connected the 2 characters in the story. So what was it that prompted you to use a musical instrument as well as come up with lyrics, and create a song?
So I have been performing on stage on and off for about 5 or 6 years now. But I have the worst stage fright. I get so afraid of being on stage or being looked at. And when I noticed the camera was just as harsh as an audience, if not worse. So I had gone through many revisions of this. I was sitting in front of a camera, just reading this, telling the story to myself. And when I picked up my ukulele, I felt safe because that wasn't just some random ukulele. It belonged to my grandma who passed away 2 years ago. But it was a really busted old ukulele with bad tuning. But holding that made me feel safe. So I thought I should incorporate that into the performance and make it personal to me. Even the story I chose had a lot of relation to my family. So being able to combine that ukulele into that story for me was an opportunity to just go for it. And yeah.
So that's something important, right? You mentioned the story that you selected. So I think one of the things that both of us, agreed upon right at the beginning of this collaboration was that we allow the spoken word artists to choose what stories they would like to adapt and to tell. So what was that process like? Do you think that any story lends itself to being adapted and presented not just as storytelling, but on video? Or are there other considerations, what kind of stories lend themselves? What kind of text actually lends themselves to being presented as a story?
So the kind of stories I thought would lend themselves well for adaptations would be those that are relevant and resonant, not only to the performer, but to the audience as well. So this involves like, does it fit with the times? What sort of message is the story trying to send out at the moment? Is it relevant to the audience at the moment? Is it fun for the performer? Is it responsible storytelling? I've mentioned before in previous press junkets for KL Noir that the Malaysian interpretation of noir can be quite violent and scary and dark. So we do have stories like that in magic as well. But are those stories necessarily the ones that needs to be retold at like StoryFest? So we thought about those kind of stuff. And one of my favorite stories from KL Noir was, I guess I can say it here, it was written by Colin Yeo. It's called A Night at Tulips. So immediately when I heard about this opportunity, I was like, someone needs to do A Night at Tulips. But the way it was written does not lend itself well to storytelling. It was written entirely in dialogue. There was no narration whatsoever. From start to end, just dialogue, one person's dialogue. So we thought like, oh, it was sad that we had to let that one go, but we just couldn't do that. That's an example of a story that we found could not work for storytelling. And in the end, we went with the 7 that we went for.
So Deric, I know it's been very challenging, right? Not just working under pandemic restrictions, but also doing this for the first time. But I'm sure there were some good outcomes and some learning points. Would you be able to share with us?
One of the best parts about doing this project, I thought, was figuring out how to adapt performances from text to a person performing it to video, because I noticed the adapting process doesn't stop at the performance, it continues into editing. And when you're editing, as the editor, you can make cuts to the story, what parts you feel you're giving too much away. And I thought that was so amazing, the way that when we work with video, the possibilities have just expanded. Yes, it's harder, but you can come up with products that are more finished, that resonates more with the audience. And I thank you for that, because I love doing it. I love doing it so much, just video.
Okay, in one word, how would you describe this process of adapting KL Noir Magic, the anthology, and selecting 7 stories into 7 short storytelling videos?
There's only one answer for that, obviously magical.
So we only adapted 7 out of 20 short stories in the KL Noir Magic anthology. So for our viewers and listeners who have watched those videos and they want to find out more about the other stories offered, can you tell us where they can find the book?
Singaporean readers can get it off Shopee for now, but Malaysian readers can get it from Kinokuniya, MPH, Kedai Fiksi, as well as Shopee. The book is available at almost all good bookstores near you. And international readers can get the book off Amazon, which is available now. And the ebook is available on Google Play as well. So there's really no excuse not to get the book. Get it, guys, please get it.
Thanks, Deric. I mean, that was so much fun talking with you about KL Noir Magic and this whole process of adapting text into storytelling performance. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kamini. Thank you so much for having me.
I've been speaking with Deric, arts manager and writer based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and we've been discussing KL Noir Magic storytelling series, the adaptation of text into storytelling performance. If you'd like to listen to more conversations like this, please do follow us on our StoryFest YouTube channel and look for the Story Talk series.